Renata, the standoff began when law enforcement attempted to serve a felony DWI arrest warrant to 36-year-old David Cady. But after 3 days, Cady was found dead in his Hornbrook Road home. Now the Tompkins County Sheriff's Office has answered some questions. According to a preliminary autopsy report, Cady died of a single self-inflicted gunshot wound. The Tompkins County Sheriff's Office also learned that Cady owned multiple firearms and had been traveling to Pennsylvania to purchase ammunition, all to prepare for a possible standoff with police, because Cady reportedly told outside sources he didn't want to go back to jail for a second DWI conviction. Law enforcement says they saw Cady multiple times walking through the house carrying a long gun, but the last time they saw him was late Thursday. They weren't able to communicate with him during the days-long incident. And by Friday morning, law enforcement found it necessary to breach part of the house to take Cady into custody. And when they got inside, they found his body, along with multiple guns, strategically placed throughout the home. According to Sheriff Ken Lansing, all efforts were made to resolve the situation peacefully and safely. The sheriff's office did not specify why they decided to tear apart the home or if they knew about the stashed weapons before or after they got inside. Our repeated attempts to contact Sheriff Lansing have been unsuccessful. Our report is based off of information provided by the Tompkins County Sheriff's Office. However, we just spoke with a member of the Cady family who is disputing some of those facts. We will continue to look into the story and keep you updated. The 3-day standoff ended last Friday after law enforcement breached the house and found David Cady dead. But after articles, pictures, and videos hit the internet, many people, including Cady's family, have questioned law enforcement's practices. The Cady's house is left looking like a tornado ripped through it after a 3-day-long standoff on Hornbrook Road. Tompkins County Sheriff Ken Lansing says Cady fired one shot Tuesday night, enough to worry law enforcement of the weapons possibly inside. Lansing says at one point Wednesday, law enforcement was unsure if Cady could be dead inside, but they reported then seeing him walking through the house on Thursday. But Friday, when law enforcement got inside, they found Cady's body. The autopsy indicates he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, one that Lansing says law enforcement truly didn't even hear.
Being inside on a fully armored vehicle that's made for police, SWAT teams and stuff, and with radio transmissions and things like that, to hear a gunshot coming from inside a home, especially if it was muffled in any way by being held close to your body or whatever, probably would not happen. And we never did hear a gunshot other than the one when he fired at us.
Lansing said what neighbors probably heard were the other tactical measures taken to get Cady to surrender before law enforcement started to breach the home. But people wonder why such extreme measures were taken. Lansing says breaching the home was a tactic recommended by bigger agencies. The goal was to remove the surroundings from Cady, hoping he would eventually come out.
There was a time where we considered, going into the home. And we didn't. I said, no, time is on our side. We had the place contained. We had the suspect contained. And for the welfare of the community and everybody else, and him included, time was on our side. We were trying to just wait him out and convince him that, this could be done in a peaceful manner.
However, Cady's family is disputing some of the information in Lansing's report. Tune in to WENY News at 11 when Cady's wife tells us her side of the story from the very moment the incident started.
But now WENY's Leanne DeRosa brings us a different point of view, that of Cady's wife. Leanne?
Aisha, days after the 3-day standoff on Hornbrook Road ended and days before she lays her husband to rest, Melissa Cady says she's left with unanswered questions about why law enforcement responded the way they did.
My husband told me that he was not coming out of there alive. He told me that. I can't make decisions for him. Bottom line, I don't blame any of them for him passing. None of them. He made that decision.
And Melissa Cady said law enforcement made theirs. It all started the evening of December 30th when an officer showed up at her door to serve her husband an arrest warrant related to a DWI. The fear of going to jail had David Cady reaching for one of his hunting guns.
I grabbed each kid by the hand and I looked up at my husband and I said, "We didn't sign up for this." And he said, "No, you didn't." And he kissed me and we walked out of that house. We were never held hostage. Never.
From there, nearly 20 different law enforcement agencies arrived on scene. Melissa says David fired one shot into the air. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office says it was aimed at patrol cars. Tensions grew, and Melissa spoke with her husband one last time at 4:16 Wednesday morning. She says she knew after that phone call it was the end for him.
He said, Missy, are you going to be on the other side of that door to take my hand? And I said, no, honey, they won't let me. And he said, then no, honey, I can't come out. He said, Missy, I've always loved you. And he hung up. And that was the last phone conversation that anyone had with him. Anyone.
After that, Melissa says she heard another gunshot and believed that's when David took his life. But for law enforcement, their tactics would still escalate.
I gave them everything they needed to get into that home safely.
And to get him out.
To get him out safely. And all they did is took what I gave them and destroyed my home.
Melissa says they used flashbangs and she found at least 67 canisters of tear gas. She says if David was still alive at that point, he would have been incapacitated, allowing for police to take him into custody. We spoke with Sheriff Lansing, and he says the agencies picked their practices based on what's best for everyone's safety. But those practices left the Cady home in pieces as a neighbor watched it all go down.
He watched them come through my side yard and come right out the other side of my bathroom.
Just drove right straight.
Just drove straight through it.
Now the Cady's home looks like a tornado destroyed it. Melissa says officers kept her in the loop, but what she found was worse than she ever expected.
I felt betrayed. I felt lied to. To be honest with you, that's what I felt.
Melissa and her family and friends agree that they support the police, and we're all for keeping them safe too. But now that it's over, her family is left without a father and husband and without a home, and she questions whether such extreme measures were necessary.
Bottom line, I don't hate the police. I don't. I just hate what they've done. I'm disgusted with what they've done. And something needs to be stopped. No one else should ever have to do what I'm doing right now.
But Melissa Cady and her family aren't the only ones with questions. A handful of people addressed the Tompkins County Legislature last night to express their concerns as well, saying they want more information about law enforcement's actions. Public Safety Committee Vice Chair Jim Dennis also asked the Sheriff's Office to provide a recap of the incident at the January 12th Public Safety Committee meeting. Jennifer, after the standoff left David Cady dead and a house completely destroyed, the community has been questioning why law enforcement's actions went as far as they did. It was a packed house at the Tompkins County Public Safety Committee meeting. Dozens of community members, along with David Cady's widow Melissa, came out to share their thoughts and get some answers. Some offered their thanks and support to the police, but majority of others had a different point of view.
Humbly, I would appreciate if the law enforcement does an after-action report and that be independently reviewed.
I don't hate the police at all. I don't. I question the leadership of the police during this operation. I don't know how or why or when it went as far as it went. I don't get it.
For almost 2 hours, Ithaca Police, the Sheriff's Department, New York State Police, the DA, and many others involved recapped the situation from each of their perspectives, giving a detailed description down to the minute, starting with the response when they showed up at the Cady's house.
The female stated that he wasn't there. The deputies advised the female that they heard him talking and he needs to come out so they can serve the warrant.
To the multiple times they had contact and tried to negotiate with Cady.
At 0148, another sent update. Negotiators have now been on and off the phone with Cady 14 times since the beginning of the call. During the periods that they were not speaking with him, they were attempting to reach him a total of 44 times.
even the tactics they decided to use, including robots, which law enforcement say eventually went out of service, to tear gas, which they say possibly didn't always deploy properly, or throw phones, which they say picked up the sound of David Cady coughing and moving, but didn't help with further contact, and finally, the armored vehicles eventually used to breach the home.
We hit the house several times in different areas to try to be able to see better inside the residence, so that the suspect would know that we were there and we were going to get him to come out one way or the other.
The sheriff and other officials stressed their actions and approaches were all aimed at getting Cady to surrender and keeping everyone safe, including the suicidal man inside.
It was not a situation that was going to result in storming the house in an effort to get him out, because that would mean somebody would die. And that was never an acceptable outcome.
Aisha, the Cady family rented the house on Hornbrook Road for about 16 years, but now that house is barely even standing, and one of the landlords says it might be a complete loss.
Couldn't really believe it, but I mean, it was just one of those things, you know, it was just kind of overwhelming, you know, I couldn't believe what you're saying.
That's how landlord Joe PETRICOLA felt when he first heard about the standoff at his rental property on Hornbrook Road in Danby. How it escalated and ended was even more overwhelming.
The worst thing about the whole thing is a loss of life. That's the worst thing. As far as the house, that can always be replaced.
But replacing the house isn't as easy as PETRICOLA thought, because the insurance company isn't helping.
They say it's not covered because it's called a civil authority, police action, or fire crew action or something. It's not covered.
So none of it's covered?
No, it's covered.
PETRICOLA says he asked law enforcement if they help cover any costs since their actions left the home ruined, but they told him no since they didn't start the situation. Now he's hired a lawyer to look into other options, but in the meantime, he still needs to take care of the house.
We have to first secure the property so no one can get in there and get hurt. And then after that, but they already condemned the property, so that means I either have to get a building permit to rebuild it the way it is now. I mean to go back to the way it is, or I have to get a demolition permit to tear it down and then start over with another home.
PETRICOLA says the list of expenses already keeps growing, and that's just to clean up the property. So he's unsure if he will even rebuild.
Well, that just depends on the funds. We are both retired now, so we may not want to invest back into it. I'm not really sure what we're going to do.
Aisha, this is the second time the Tompkins County Public Safety Committee met with the Tompkins County Sheriff's Office and Ithaca Police. They first met in mid-January, shortly after the standoff, but tonight law enforcement presented their final after-action report. 127 Hornbrook Road in Danby still stands deserted. Back in January, a 3-day standoff tore the house to pieces and left 36-year-old David Cady dead. Many community members called law enforcement's actions extreme and unnecessary. That's why the Tompkins County Public Safety Committee called for an after-action report.
The public clearly wanted some sort of real, kind of deeper understanding of what happened, and so we wanted to make sure we provided that.
The Tompkins County Sheriff and Undersheriff, as well as a lieutenant and senior investigator with Ithaca Police, presented the 34-page final after-action report to the community at the Public Safety Committee meeting. They showed pictures, gave Mr. Cady's history, detailed each day down to the minute, and much more.
On Tuesday, December 30th, 2014, at approximately 7:55 p.m.
They also outlined the tactical methods they used and discussed how past situations in Herkimer and Oneida counties influenced their practices, stressing their overall goal was to keep everyone safe, themselves and David Cady included. They set the whole scene and explained law enforcement's perspective on things.
But we are professionals. We have nothing to hide. We are giving everybody the answers to the questions that we've been given, and they're all truthful answers, obviously. There's nothing to hide here, nor would we.
The Public Safety Committee also changed their typical meeting format to allow a question and answer session, giving the community a chance to take part in the conversation.
It's hard to say whether this is actually the beginning of something new or the end. All this is just more information. And with more information, hopefully comes some clarity. And I think for some people it will be conclusive enough. Others may still have questions. And we'll certainly find ways to make sure that those questions are heard.
Many people urged the Public Safety Committee to conduct a separate investigation. Recently, the state's Attorney General declined a local petition to investigate the incident, but no one was sure why. If you would like to read the full after-action report, just go to our website and click on this story. In the studio, Leanne DeRosa, WENY News.